Did you know there's a story in Islamic tradition about an entire town of people who were turned into apes? It's one of the most shocking and cautionary tales you'll ever hear, a powerful lesson about obedience, faith, and the consequences of defiance. This isn't just a myth. It's a profound narrative meant to teach us something vital about our own lives. The story revolves around a community of fishermen, from the children of Israel, who lived in a village by the sea. Their lives were deeply intertwined with the laws given to them by God. And one of the most sacred of these laws was the observance of the Sabbath. On this day, which was Saturday, all forms of work were strictly forbidden. They were commanded to dedicate this day entirely to rest and worship. For a town of fishermen, this meant they were not allowed to cast their nets or catch any fish. For a time, the people obeyed this divine command. But then, a great test began. On every other day of the week, the fish would mysteriously disappear, making it difficult for the fishermen to make a living. However, on the Sabbath, the fish would appear in astonishing numbers. They would swim right up to the shore, so close and so plentiful that they were practically leaping out of the water. The sight was a tremendous temptation for the villagers. Day after day, they struggled to catch enough to feed their families, only to see an effortless bounty presented to them on the one day they were forbidden to touch it. This test of faith and patience eventually fractured the community. The temptation was simply too great for some to bear, and they began to devise clever ways to circumvent the law. They couldn't directly fish on the Sabbath, so they came up with a plan. On Friday, before the Sabbath began, they would dig trenches and set up nets leading from the sea into pools on the shore. On Saturday, the masses of fish would swim into these traps and become stuck. Then, on Sunday, after the Sabbath had ended, the fishermen would simply go and collect the trapped fish. In their minds, they weren't technically working on the Sabbath. They were just collecting what was already there. They thought they had outsmarted the divine commandment. The village was now split into 3 distinct groups. The first group consisted of those who openly defied the law, setting up their traps and partaking in the forbidden catch. The second group was made up of righteous individuals who were horrified by this behavior. They refused to participate and actively warned the transgressors, reminding them of God's law and the potential for severe punishment. They pleaded with their neighbors to repent and stop their deceit before it was too late. Then, there was the third group. These people did not break the law themselves, but they also remained silent. They saw the wrongdoing but chose not to speak out against it. When the righteous group confronted them, asking why they didn't join in forbidding the evil, they replied, "Why do you preach to a people whom God is about to destroy or punish with a severe torment?" They had given up on their neighbors and decided to simply mind their own business, separating themselves from the issue entirely. The righteous ones responded that they were warning the sinners to clear themselves of any blame before God, and in the hope that perhaps the transgressors might listen and return to the righteous path. The warnings went unheeded. The defiant fishermen continued their tricks, growing more arrogant and prosperous from their forbidden hauls. They mocked the pious group, dismissing their pleas as foolish. The day of reckoning finally arrived. One morning, the town fell eerily silent. When some of the righteous people went to check on their neighbors, they found a horrifying scene. The doors were locked from the inside, and strange, animalistic sounds echoed from within. When they finally broke down the doors, they discovered that all the people who had broken the Sabbath law, as well as those who had remained silent in the face of their transgression, had been transformed. They were turned into apes. They still recognized their relatives who had remained righteous, looking at them with sad, pleading eyes, but they could no longer speak. They were apes in form and behavior, a living, breathing symbol of their spiritual degradation. As the Quran states, when they were insolent about that which they had been forbidden, God said to them, "Be apes despised." This divine punishment served as a stark and terrifying lesson. Only the small group of believers who had actively spoken out against the evil were saved. The rest were wiped out in this humiliating form, a permanent reminder of the consequences of disobeying God's commands and the importance of standing up for what is right. This story isn't just about fishing on a certain day. It's a timeless allegory about greed, deception, and the collective responsibility of a community to uphold moral and spiritual laws.